Welcome to the Recruiting Mindset. My name is Mindy McCarthy, and my mission is to help those athletes who are trying to take their talents to the next level through the recruiting process. Today, I'm very excited to chat with Chris Meadows. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Mindy. It's been a great day, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Awesome. Well, we are very lucky to have you. Chris, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So let everyone know who you are, where you're from, and what you're up to these days.
Well, as you said, my name is Chris Meadows, and I am obviously I've coached basketball for 25 plus years, and done a lot of player development, at different stages, and continue to do that in isolated situations. But more importantly, other than a coach and a player development coach, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm someone who is committed. I am committed in every aspect of my life in helping young people succeed and to accomplish their dreams through the game of basketball.
And that is fantastic. And obviously, you have a large background in basketball. So, talk to us a little bit about your journey. Take us all the way back to childhood, playing basketball, what that looked like for you, and onward.
Well, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, so in a completely different part of the country than we are here. But my experience with basketball goes back as far as I can remember. I grew up playing all sports, baseball, football, basketball, a little bit soccer, but basketball was something you could just pick up a ball, go to the court in your driveway or the park, or obviously at school and recess. So I grew to love the game early. And, I had two older brothers and a younger brother. So, we were always around it. Everyone in my neighborhood, it wasn't like today where you had to have a trainer. Like literally we just grew up playing basketball, whether it was 21, we name it, you name it, we played it. But it was born out of a source of love. It was fun. And so the older I got, the more competitive it became at the boys club, the YMCA, and back then AAU wasn't really so big. Um, we had one team that represented our entire city, and I was fortunate enough to make that every year. So I was able to travel the country as a young player and play against the best players in the country. Back then it was Kenny Anderson, Larry Johnson, all those guys, and I was able to play and had a pretty good high school career, and it just kind of was born from there. I just grew up playing a lot of pickup basketball and working on my games, working on things by myself. But the love of the game was something that was instilled just through just the open gyms, and as I became a high school player, I was becoming one of the better players in the state. And one summer that, talk about basketball. One summer that kind of, I think really helped propel my mindset and my confidence was I was allowed to play pickup ball with the Phoenix Suns one summer. And I was the only player who was not either playing professionally overseas or college allowed to even play in those games. And just spending that summer playing with the Phoenix Suns, it was not only were you like excited about it, wasn't necessarily in awe of them after the first game or so, but just knowing I'm playing with some of the best players in the world. And if I can play with these guys, no matter what camps I go to, no matter where I play, I know I can be one of the best on the floor. So from a mindset perspective and confidence, that kind of just put me through the roof.
hmm That is certainly an awesome opportunity, especially as a young athlete, to be able to play on the same court, but even to compete with those guys as well. So not only just kind of a joke and pickup game or something like that, like they'll sometimes do with younger kids, it was you were actually competing against them, which is awesome.
Yes, it was. It was.
Good. Well, what was your recruiting journey like? So you realize, you can take this to the next level. You are capable of being one of the best athletes in the country. So what was your recruiting process like?
It was interesting. My recruiting process was not necessarily like a lot of kids today. Um, Back then, recruiting was quite different because it was word of mouth, um, and coaches would see you play. It was more exposure camps in the summer. Like I remember being invited to the Blue Chip All American camp in Northern Kentucky University, but it was not for their university. It was like some of the best players in the country. And, literally there were guys who were future pros there. And so when you receive those invitations, back then it was like 5-star, blue chip, All-American. And so when you receive those invitations, you knew college coaches were there. Like, and I was young. I wasn't really as informed, being like 14, 15 years old. But I went out there and I made the top 15 All-Star game. And my recruiting just kind of skyrocketed. And then they would have these BCI was sort of like AAU in the West, and New York Riverside Church, and those teams would come out, and you play well in those things, and then you get your name out there, and that's where all the college coaches came. And so, I would get a lot of letters, and at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but then I started getting a lot of phone calls, and I had offers, and I had a lot of people who wanted me to sign coming out of high school. And this is one reason, like my recruiting actually, it was kind of organic. Like I was just playing basketball and it was just happening on its own. As a sophomore, I was one of the top 10 scorers in the state of Arizona. So it kind of started to blow up early for me. But one of the things that I didn't have that's probably the fuel behind my passion for young people was that I did not have the structure academically. So I ended up going to a junior college. And it wasn't that school was necessarily challenging. I just didn't have the structure. I didn't have the study habits. And so all of the offers that I had, I couldn't accept them because I had to go to a junior college. And then it like starts all over again, because, you go back through the junior college ranks. And so in high school, I just remember getting so much communication that I had trash bags filled with letters. I just throw them in big trash bags. I would just throw all the letters in trash bags. I'd read them, okay. And I just remember, I think like Bobby Crimmins was recruiting me hard from he was at Georgia Tech at the time. Patino he was at Providence. They had Billy Donovan, I don't know where Billy Donovan's coaching now. Is he in the NBA or college? One of the two. But he was their point guard. He was recruiting me really heavy. And I wanted to go back east. I didn't want to stay in the West. So, but all that really came to naught because I ended up going to a junior college. And so after 2 years of junior college, when I came out, I wanted to go to a school where I could play right away. I didn't have time to waste. So I chose St. Bonaventure in the Atlantic 10. So I went there.
Awesome. And do you feel like that time in junior college helped your development as a player or even as a person kind of out on your own?
It definitely was a transition because all of my peers, they went to 4-year schools. The players that I was peers with on a national level, that they had me, in the same like tier with. So people like Lee Mayberry, he went to Arkansas, won a national championship. Like a lot of my peers that I was with all the time, Kenny Anderson went to Georgia Tech. And so I had to take an alternative route. And that alternative route, you discover a lot about yourself because you have to do it on your own. You're not necessarily an adult, but you're no longer a high school student. And my junior college wasn't a bad situation, but it was always, I think junior college is probably going to be what you make of it. So they don't have the structure that a university would have. So I went through that, and I was fortunate enough. I was very blessed to be able to still play at the Division I level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned wanting to go back to the East Coast. You mentioned wanting to be able to play right away when you did make it to that D1 level. What were some other things that you valued when looking at schools to take that next step?
It was relationships for me. So I didn't really meet the head coach until I went on a visit. I worked directly with one of the assistants, and I mean I talked to the head coach, but we just had such a great relationship, and we still do to this day. My wife and I, we're still friends with him and his wife. His name is John Ruby. He was just a great guy. He was able to relate, and that sold me. It didn't matter who else offered. I was focused on, I wanted to play for him, and he was just a great guy. So For me, it was about relationships. I didn't want to be in a program where I didn't have great relationship with the coaching staff.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, especially developing relationships with other people, and those other people turn into your family. So making sure you get along with that family, you're cohesive with that family, I'm sure is absolutely important.
It is, and then and it goes far beyond those years. That once you finish and you graduate, those relationships still are intact.
Hmm. What advice were you given during this process? So whether it's going from high school to junior college or junior college to Division One, what advice were you given as part of your recruiting process?
You know, it's interesting, Mindy, is that I didn't really have an inner circle who really advised me. And again, I think that's why I'm so passionate about helping young people, because I felt like I arrived at St. Bonaventure ready to play, like literally ready to have an impact at that level, but not ready to manage like the time management, the discipline and all the other things that go into making you successful as a student athlete. So where you may come in focused on just basketball at that level, you have to be a professional person because you have 6 a.m. practices, but you have to be there like 5:15 to get taped, and then you have study hall at 3, you have individual workouts, you may have to meet with tutor. Like your entire day is already arranged for you. And if you're not used to that and you don't understand the importance of like getting proper rest and things like that, it's going to impact you on the court, your relationship with your coaching. So I didn't really have the advice that I needed to step in and be like a total just elite student athlete. So I would say I was imbalanced at that time.
Hmm. And I'm sure a lot of athletes kind of go through that. They don't really understand how much time they are committed to being a student athlete that they don't necessarily have control over. Like you mentioned, the workouts, practices, study hall. And then that's not even to mention the classes that they have to be in person on campus for. So, looking back on that time, what time management techniques would you offer them?
To all the young people who really aspire to play at the D1, D2 level, just the college level period, is I say it has to be a labor of love. Like I really feel like it has to be something that you love because it's your life. My daughter's currently a point guard at the Division 1 level, and it was an easy transition for her because she was prepared. Like she already knew what to expect. She'd been around, elite athletes. She was exposed to it from day one, so it wasn't a hard transition for her. She had friends that were older than her who were playing at a high level. But what I would share with student athletes right now who are trying to aspiring to get there is that you have to, I would say you have to edit your life. And what I mean by that is you have to do a good job of knowing what's needed and what's not. And you have to kind of chop it. You got to let things go that could be distractions to you. Because if you don't edit your life and you're still completely accessible to your friends through social media and on Instagram and all those things, those are more distractions that are going to take away from your proper focus. So there's a sacrifice that they have to be willing to make to get what they want, but you can't have it all. Like those who have it all, they underachieve. So I would say edit your life from a priority standpoint. Hey, if this is what you really, really want, and you work so hard to get this close, certain things have to be secondary, for by far. And then other things need to be pushed up to primary, like time management is crucial, not waiting for deadlines with assignments. Those things are crucial because there's always something that you have to do when you're a Division 1, Division 2 basketball player. It's just your lifestyle, and it's not a negative. There's a reward, but you have a priority, and you're there as a student athlete, and you have to remember that. But your coach is going to see you there as an athlete student, so they're going to always have their agenda has to be met if you want to maintain your scholarship. So you always have to balance that.
And that's something that'll go far beyond your college years to well into
Yes.
adulthood, learning how to manage your time. Absolutely. Well, you've mentioned several times that your passion now is helping athletes make it to the next level, understand what it takes. So, you are the author of I Am D1. Tell us about your book.
Wow. I am D1. Well, first of all, I want to make sure that everyone who hears that, I know that's what every young person wants to do, play D1. Okay. Not going to happen for everybody. It's not that they're all not good enough. There are just some who, whether it's size, whether it's athleticism, whatever it is, that you won't make it. But your D1 is going to be wherever you land because you will be the focal point of that school's program. And I Am D1, the book, is really at the end, the last chapter is about mindset. So it's really about developing the proper mindset to be a success. And as a family, understanding what it takes to achieve those goals. So this book is written to empower players and families to understand the process, to be able to make a plan so that they can sustain the long road, the long journey, and be successful with it at the end. So anyone who picks up this book, I really feel like they're going to have not necessarily a guide, but they're going to have a resource for whatever they encounter. And I wanted to be very real with this book. I didn't want to be cliche, like you're not going to find what it takes minimum SAT scores because you can get that stuff from the NCAA.org. And now California just announced yesterday that they no longer even going to accept SAT scores. So because all education, systems and school systems don't necessarily have equity with their education, so a test wouldn't be able to consider that. So I wanted this book to truly be able to be a resource. So you say, you know what, man, how do we really find a good trainer? If that's going to be a key. It's like if your kid is focused on academics, you need a great tutor for whether it's, trigonometry, I don't know. Well, who's the best? What criteria do we need? I don't think people are out there getting that. I don't think people know what they should look for when they find a trainer, other than ask someone word of mouth. But this guy may not be doing, or this girl may not be doing a great job with teaching you fancy moves. But are they teaching you how to play? Are they teaching you things that can be applicable in a game environment? See, that's what I wanted to help parents. So, if I'm heated after every game my daughter and my son plays on the ride home, one chapter is titled The Ride Home. Am I really helping them by just going off after every game? Or do I need to, let's get two pillars that we have to live by. If you play hard with great effort every game, and if you have a good attitude, the rest we can fix. That was my theory. So if you played hard and you had a good attitude, you have to smile when you play, but had a good attitude, competed, everything else is fixable. So I wanted to help players understand also what it takes. So I think the second chapter is sacrifice. So I paint a picture of a real life situation of a player who sacrificed a lot as a freshman. And this player right now is on the draft board. They are on the draft board to be drafted in the NBA as a 18 or 19-year-old. And it goes back to that freshman year. I was able to see this happening right in front of my face. And we did the same thing. So I wanted to give every player globally, every parent, family globally who desires to play at the Division I, Division II level, I wanted to give them kind of like a blueprint and say, if I can reuse this resource, I know we got a shot. So they wouldn't have to guess. And it took 2 years to do, a lot of planning, a lot of compiling, and a lot of thought. And then I had to remove a lot of it, when I got my editorial team, because I didn't want this to be a long read. I want it to be a quick read, easy read, but to say, you know what? I picked this book up. I can get through it quickly, but I also have a place in the back where takeaways, you can write notes, because I want it to be a continual resource. Don't just read it once and put it down. So that's what's behind the book. Long explanation, but I feel like the quantity wasn't as important in terms of how many pages, but I want the quality to be, at a high level.
Mm-hmm. And even in that description, you just mentioned all of the components that go into like one athlete's life and one athlete's recruiting process, from coaches to family to trainers. And a lot of athletes are probably getting all this information from so many different sources. And I think you filled that void by producing this book and saying, okay, here's one resource that has essentially everything you need to know about the recruiting process, recommendations, and especially up to date options as well. Because you mentioned in your recruiting process, you were getting a lot of letters and things like that. But now with social media and emails and phone calls and texts and things like that, the communication is a little bit different. But how athletes kind of adjust to that new age information, I think this book definitely gives the athlete and definitely the family members a good resource to do that.
Yeah, and I have put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you a question now. Give me maybe your best takeaways from what you read.
So, as a sports psychology consultant, I loved all the mindset pieces. So, I mean, one thing you talked about was like trainers developing confidence. And if a trainer's not doing that, then maybe you need to find another trainer. Can, just as you said too, with, any physical skills can be adjusted, but if you don't necessarily have the work ethic or a positive attitude or even good communication skills, then that's going to hinder you more than just like the physical skills on the court. And so I love that you touched on those pieces as well, and then also gave the players an opportunity to be their own advocate as well, speak up about their skills, and that can continue to develop confidence as well by them being able to brag about themselves, saying like, this is what I have to offer, but also reaching out to schools themselves saying, hey, I'm interested in your program for these reasons. What can you tell me about your program? How can I fit in there? And again, just kind of coming back to their own personal advocacy.
Mhm. Well, good. I always like to know what people take away from it, because I just think if it's going to be relevant, I mean, some people may write a book to say they wrote a book. I didn't write a book to say I wrote a book. I wrote a book to help, like genuinely, sincerely help people say, I can do this. I can do it the right way. So I appreciate what you shared.
Certainly. Well, let's unpack some of the descriptors that you gave about the book. So, I know you mentioned like the ride home, finding a trainer, and things like that. In the book, you said playing for a credible travel program often helps the player in areas that cannot be measured by minutes. And I wanted you to kind of explain that in a little bit more detail for the audience.
Okay, so I'm really glad you answered that question, because I didn't say a shoe company team. I said a credible program on purpose, because there are some really good independent teams that are very highly credible. And what that means is that you can play for a team, it could be local or not, where you're getting the bulk of the minutes, you're getting buckets all game, putting up numbers. And I think there's a time and place for all of that, especially it develops confidence. Um, and then you can be playing for a team, especially when you get to high school. This is very important. You could be playing for a team like that, and you're at an event and you're doing great. Maybe the competition is substandard, I don't know. However, coaches may not ever see you because you're not on the top course. When you go to an event, as you get older, you got to be on the top course. I'm just telling you. And if you're not, and they happen to see you can play, they're they're going to want to see you play against the players on the top court to see if you can do that with elite athletes and higher level competition and competitors. So, for example, you may play for team whatever, team unstoppable, whatever team that is, and it's an elite team. It's one of the top teams, or highly credible. The coach knows everybody. It's a very good team, and you're a very good player. But maybe you don't start on this team. Maybe you come in, you play half the game, 3/4 of the game. I don't know, but you don't start. But everyone on your team is being recruited highly, and you don't start. But you're playing with those elite players, a highly credible coach who has a reputation putting players into college. You're going to get recruited at a high level. I've seen it happen on the boys' side, on the girls' side, and I've seen many of those players get drafted. Um, so if you're playing for a credible program, those things that many parents and players focus on, starting and how many points, they don't matter, because those program directors our coaches are proven to produce quality college players who understand how to come to college ready and who compete at a high level, and making the transition is going to be a shoe-in. Whereas if you're playing for a team does not have credibility, but you're getting a lot of minutes and points, they don't really even move at that, because the credibility of that, it doesn't stand the test. So I know some parents, more so on the girl side, who keep their daughters close. They won't let them play with elite competition, and it ends up hurting them in the end when it comes time for a scholarship, because they get basically almost like a false sense of reality by playing with lower level teams. And it's not that it's a lower level team, but your competition level has to be higher. So if you're going to play for a credible program director and coach, even if you don't have the same amount of opportunity, it's going to help you in the end, because you're going to get more exposure, you're going to play with better players, and you're going to be seen. So that's exactly what I meant by playing for a credible program can be more valuable than, getting a lot of minutes somewhere else.
I definitely agree. You also mentioned parents playing into decision making, and you mentioned earlier sacrifices that need to be made by the athlete, but also the family members who are supporting the athlete. So, how do you create a realistic picture for families as far as the sacrifices that everyone in the family needs to make?
Um, I I try to make this very vivid throughout the entire book. I wanted to be consistent with this because it's it's going to impact the entire family, not in a negative sense, but there's a domino effect, because if you want to play in college, you're going to first of all have to train daily. So even if you're not with a trainer, you're going to have to put in hours. So at some point, there's a parent that's going to have to drive you to that gym or that park or that practice. Um, so that means that somebody's giving up time. So if it's your mother, or father, it means you probably won't be eating dinner with the family. So now you're going to spend more money, going to be eating out because you're going to be up early and up late. Um, Many players don't play with teams that are local. So, like, for example, I drove every year my daughter was in high school, we drove to Atlanta. So for 4 years, we drove to Atlanta. That was a 4-hour drive each way. If it wasn't traffic, if it was more. And that meant, on the weekends, I was also away from home, couldn't do little things from my perspective, like yard work, things like that. So I'm sacrificing, not alone the money. Um, and it was like my wife would take my son one direction, I'm going another. So it was a family sacrifice. So for the month of July every year, that's pretty much 3 weeks on the road. So if you're going to Indianapolis, if you're going to Louisville, if you're going to, New Orleans, fortunately, at least one of those events would be here in Charlotte, but you're going to have to sacrifice financially too. So then, from a player perspective, every year there's always a tournament the last weekend of April, which is generally prom weekend. So some players might miss, some players will miss a game and go home, come back for Sunday games. Like it's just a constant family sacrifice, and your parents have to be willing to always be accessible to go. And so it's a sacrifice for the entire family. Like my son basically spent a couple summers traveling with us to watch his sister play basketball because we were all over the map, and that impacted all of us. So, and it's not a negative thing. I mean, at the end of the day, your daughter or your son signs a scholarship that's going to be worth well over $300,000 or $400,000. So you got to put that time in order to get it. But it is giving up something for both parties.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that most people don't realize. And I hope athletes also appreciate and show their gratitude for their families too, as well, because that is a sacrifice that they're making.
Yes, it is huge.
Well, another thing we kind of touched on earlier as well, I want to read another quote from your book. You said, keep in mind that results from training won't always be measured quantitatively. However, player confidence should invariably be the result of effective training sessions. So, as a coach and a trainer yourself, how do you like to instill confidence in your athletes?
Wow, good question. Good question. I always felt like I can't get the body to change if the mind doesn't change. Like I just feel like it's mind before body. Like it's the mindset changes, the habits will change. Because many players train all the time and some never really see results because their thought process is still the same. So if your thought process is still the same, it doesn't matter what you do physically, you're still not going to believe you can do that when you get on the court. So when I'm training, you know, first of all, my approach with any athlete that I work with is I let them know up front, hey, we're getting ready to become the most confident player on the floor. And so once I have different stages that I go through in my training sessions, but when we get into, after we get through the teaching phase and we start getting to the application or the repetition phase, our reps become game speed. And when you do anything consistently at high intensity over a duration of time, you develop confidence. It becomes muscle memory. So the key is consistently. Now, we've taught it properly first, but consistently, and you're doing it with high intensity. See, that's where many players struggle in games because they never really train to be sharp, to be precise, to be intense. And then to go through that and over, and then with contact, making the player also adjust, react. And we do that, high volume reps and over a duration. Like I've had players work with me and they see immediate results. I think it's because of the confidence piece. It's a confidence piece. And I give constant feedback in my training set. It's like, great job. Let's do this again. Like it's constant reinforcement and it's very intense once we get to that phase. And so in games, a lot of times they don't have to make shots, but you just see the confidence level. Like, man, they're taking shots they normally wouldn't take, or man, they're making plays they normally wouldn't make because now they believe. So they're doing it all out. So it's always easy to spot a player who's not confident because they don't compete at a high level. They second guess themselves. Like you got to get to the mental part. And that's my whole focus. So my thing is I'm going to have a player so confident that they are going to step on the court knowing that they're going to expecting to get positive results. And you can see that. It doesn't matter how many shots they miss. You can watch Steph Curry go 0 for 17, but he believes he's still going to make every shot. And that's the piece that I feel I add to player development.
Yeah, the mental game is very much important because it plays such a big role in how a player competes and how they perform, especially at a high level. So being able to give them that, consistent atmosphere, that game speed, and that repetition is very helpful just to develop their confidence and then be able to perform at the right times too, not only against lower level athletes, but against the biggest competition.
Yes, and many players they've never been challenged. I always tell players, your comfort zone is a killer. You got to get out of your comfort zone. Comfort zones are killers because they don't allow you to stretch. They don't stretch you beyond what your norm is. So I've had a lot of players work with me, girls included. I'm like looking at a player and I'll say, have you ever grabbed a rim before? No. Or have you ever grabbed a rim with two hands? No. And I'm looking at them jump over the rim, but they don't realize it. No, I can't. So I've had players in the middle of a workout or practice just put the ball down, go up and jump and grab the rim. By the third time, they're hanging on it. But they've never been stretched. Like they just go and they do the same thing every day, day after day after day. And I'm like, how do you get better if you're never really challenged. And that's what I think should be the job of any trainer, is not only to improve their skill set, but to challenge, to help them grow. That's why they call them like the growing pains. That's because you're stretching, and if you don't stretch them, I don't think you're ever going to see what their potential is.
Yeah, like you're letting them know these are limits that you've placed on yourself, but they're not a reality. So stretching far beyond that. And you mentioned, these are things that trainers should be doing, but in the book, you also talk about work ethic for individual athletes, getting out there before the sun rises or after the sun goes down, shooting in the dark and things like that. So how do you instill a good work ethic in athletes as well to do the work on their own time?
A lot of athletes, this just comes from their family, mother or father. They understand. They've been in an environment where that's all they know. Like I know some athletes that reach out to me once they get to college as a freshman, say, "Coach, this is some of my teammates just don't work." Like they go to practice and that's it. Because I always warn freshmen, embrace don't embrace the norms once you learn them. So if you go to a program and you're really a worker, but you notice a lot of your teammates don't work, don't take your foot off the gas. Like you have to continue to maintain the habits that got you there. And so with players who are being introduced to it, like a lot of players, honestly, it's not a lot, but I had a fair share who they didn't like working with me because it was too hard. Like we were too intense. And then the competition level, it just wasn't comfortable enough. And those players that did work with me, every single one, not 99, 100% had success in high school and in college, and many are in the pros now. And like with the players who work with me, they understood what our sessions were going to be about. They understood that we did things that were not the norm. So we're doing a shooting segment. It's not going to be for 60 seconds. We're going to go for 2 straight minutes, and those reps are going to come quick. And we're going to make free throws at the end. We're making 10 in a row, or we're making 10 in a row. We don't count the ones that hit the rim because you're not in a game environment. So let's get that muscle memory to get used to getting swishes. Like when we're doing moves or doing different things, we just have a different level of expectation. And it wasn't always about recording it and putting it on Instagram or Twitter. I like being in a facility where it's really just like a cave where we're really working so that we don't have to worry about if we make mistakes, where these young people can come out and know it's transformation. And I think that's what, you have to shoot for, is how can we transform this player? And that's just the way I think. So the comfort zone that many people like to go in and train with, I actually had a couple players who play overseas this year come back and train with some high school kids and a few college kids this past summer, during COVID. Both of them, it was a girl and a guy. Both play professionally right now. They couldn't finish the session. Because they were used to being comfortable. And, I think some of the high school and college kids, like, man, they play professional. They're not. They weren't used to working like that anymore. So, and they both play overseas. Both play overseas professionally. So I think establishing a work environment that just from the start is very challenging. It's all you know. You can do that.
Mm-hmm. And I think sticking in your comfort zone is very relatable to the recruiting process. So in the book, you mentioned waiting for coaches to just come see you play and just kind of hoping like someone's watching or someone's talking about you. But you actually talk in the book about taking the initiative to reach out to coaches that they're interested in. So what does that do for players as they are reaching out on their own to schools that they are interested in playing?
Well, I think if you look back in that segment of the book on recruiting, and that portion of the recruiting segment, I kind of give them a template to follow through, from climate, style of play. There are several factors I tell them to go through, and at the end, you should be able to see like some schools that kind of stick out. And I think when you do that, you should be confident in approaching those coaches to say, hey, I noticed you play this style of basketball. You have these academic requirements for players that you recruit, and you're in a geographic area, if that's even important to you, and I know I can help your program. Like if you can come to a coach like that, what coach in America is not going to respond to that player that confident and say, you know what, send me a video, send me a link to a full game. That's what's going to happen because you're different. You're not saying, can you come see me play, like the typical stuff? Here's my video. No, if you can speak intelligently on the factors that matter to coaches. I noticed you shot 43% from the three. I shoot the three at a high clip off the bounce, off the catch. I can defend full court. And I played with and against high level players. Here's a video of me playing one of the top players in my city, right here, that you recruited or blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, it's every single time I do it, they respond the same day. Doesn't matter what level. It could be SEC, ACC, it could be Big South, it could be Conference USA, Pac-12, Mountain West. They all respond when you communicate with them a certain way because they are trying to sift through, the smoke. So if you can come with them with some specifics, now all of a sudden you don't have to go to an event and hope they see you out of 5,000 players. It's kind of hard. But also, that goes back to that travel program credibility. If you can say, I play with this travel program, they're really going to take you serious.
All comes back to who you're choosing to train you, the coaches you're choosing, the programs, everything like that.
Yes, it is.
Well, in sports psychology, we do focus a lot on youth athletes and youth athletes' families. In the book, you mention a whole chapter about the ride home from games. You also mentioned that looking back, and you mentioned it earlier too, looking back on being heated about your own kids' games and just kind of taking it personally, wishing they would do better, things like that. So, knowing the information that you know now, how would you change some of those rides home from your kids' games?
If my kids just played hard, had a good attitude, I would have used every ride home. First of all, I wouldn't have focused on it a lot after the game, um, because they eventually will start coming to you if you don't dwell on it. Like, and that's the thing I would adjust because you forced them at an early age to take up their own career, like take responsibility and to take ownership. A lot of parents, I don't know if my kid loves it. Well, if you give them space, you'll know. So we talk about it, hey, how you think you did, or man, you did a great job. Or if you played bad, be like, your effort was still great. Like, you don't play that bad all the time, or like you gotta like give them some reinforcement to get through that moment with some confidence. And I think most times parents it's like whack-a-mole. We take the hammer and we just hit them on the head. And I'm not saying be soft and raise soft kids. What I'm saying is you trying to build them up right now. So if they don't play bad, they don't play well, and they normally play good, that's not a big thing. I would do that differently because I would always take it personally, like, hey, that's a reflection of me. You got to play well every night. Like, man, I just watched LeBron play. He didn't play well. He played really bad the other night. That's LeBron James. I watched Skylar Diggins play other nights. He played okay, not great. So what high school or middle school player is going to play great every night? So from a parental standpoint, I would share this with all parents. Like, you got to keep the big picture in mind. Really, you don't even remember those games in a week. You forget about the game. In the most events, you played 2 or 3 in the same day. So how can you get your kid to be consistent? Like, that's what it should be. Like, if they know they play bad, they play bad, they play bad. You gotta get them. Now, that's the sports psychology. Okay, put that one away. Was there anything specific that you gotta fix that was really bad? If your shooting was just off, you didn't play bad. You just missed shots. You can just get some extra shots in or shoot it with confidence. If you made bad decisions, poor passes, or you just had an off day, and put a line through it. Let's come back and be better. Like, it doesn't have to be a true examination after every game. I think you got to understand, like, okay, I see this struggling, just overly dominant on your strong hand. Now, when you get in the gym, you got something to work on. Like, you don't have to go over that a lot. You can just go over that when you get to the training court. Like, you just got to say, use that left side. They're giving you that. Like, just take it a couple times, make them respect it. Like, there's a way psychologically where you can build what I call a mental monster if you understand it as a parent, you can build somebody that could be like Kobe if you don't beat them down. Because when you do that, confidence, self-esteem, all that stuff comes into effect if you constantly doing it. So I would be better, and I got better later with my as a father. I got better as my daughter got older. Like even in college now, she'll call me after the game, like, "Hey, Dad, how you think I did? Or what do you think about the game?" I don't call her and give her a report. No, I just want to keep her positive. So I would change that.
Yeah. And I think that's so important too, to have the child come to you now as well. That shows how much of a relationship that you were able to develop with your own kids as well. But also knowing that as a parent, you are wearing multiple hats with your kids. Sometimes they are their own worst enemy. And so you saying things that maybe they didn't necessarily do well is only going to deplete them, lower their confidence. So knowing how to kind of build them up, or even give them like feedback that can help them improve the next time, but in a way where it's not so demeaning, or even if it was a waste of time for the parent to be there watching the game.
Hey, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Like I said, it could be like whack-a-mole, and that never produces good long-term results.
Mhm. Well, is there anything else that you want to make sure people take away from the book that we haven't mentioned?
Well, it's what I want parents and players to think of is I want parents to know that this book is not just for kids. Like there are parts exclusively for parents and parts exclusively for players, but a lot of it is for both. But it's not something you buy and tell your kid, here, go read it. Because I think it's not going to be as effective if you don't read it as a parent, because it is going to help you understand, like, how do we navigate this thing successfully? Like, do I have to do everything on the calendar? No, you don't. Like, you need to know what is important to do. So if it's one thing that they take away or a couple things, I really would like for parents and families to know that there is nothing currently in this space, like you said, that is going to really be written from your perspective with someone who's walked in your shoes and who's going to give you honest information and feedback that you really think about, but you don't think you'll get in a book. So I just feel like if you're going to make an investment that's $20, which is relatively nothing compared to what you're spending on this journey, I think it's one of the best investments that you can make. I wish I would have had this tool when I was going through it, and I thought I knew it all because I played it. And that's another thing. A lot of parents, man, I played it. I already had a kid to go through it, but did you do everything right? Could you have done anything better? Like a lot of parents think that's no big deal, but they just got to value it. I hope they give it a chance so they can value what they have a chance to give to their family and learn. So that's what I would say. Like, this is something that I hope you come to value if you take the time to pick it up.
And I will vouch for that. I do think it's an amazing resource, and definitely applicable to so many athletes trying to play at the next level. And just as you said, their families too. Well, where can everyone keep up with you, Chris? Where can they find the book? Give me all your details.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share that. I have Coach Chris, so CO Chris D1 on Instagram. So COCHRIS D1 on Instagram. And I also have I am D1 the book on Instagram. So they share a lot of the same content. Um, and then I have I am D1 the book on Twitter. And then I have CO Chris D1, Coach Chris D1 on Twitter as well. And right now the book is available on Amazon, but it's sold out on Amazon. So obviously we sell it on our website too. So a lot of people are getting it. When you get on the website, I actually sign those. So if they go to imd1thebook.com, imd1thebook.com, and order there, I sign those. And then also we're getting ready to do a release, like social media release, because recently we've had a lot of high school programs and travel programs want to do this as a summer read. So we're giving a promotion for summer reads as well, for the teams.
That's awesome, especially getting a team together who are all on the same timeline, the same journey. That'll definitely be helpful. Well,
Mhm.
Chris, thank you again for chatting with us. I'm Mindy over at the Mental Peak, and thanks for watching.